Welcome, folks. Welcome back. We are in our final installment of the Bureaucracy. This is part 4 of 4. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. Now, this part's going to be fun because we're going to talk about growth of the bureaucracy and data. Show me the data, right? We're excited about this. Nobody's excited about data. It's math. Well, I guess some people are excited about data, but I've always struggled with math personally. But this is good stuff. This is important stuff. So, just to give you some idea of where we are and how we got here. So the post office was officially established in 1775, one of the first aspects of the bureaucracy ever. But we didn't really have a real bureaucracy to speak of, right? I mean, I want you to think back, way back to when Thomas Jefferson was Secretary of State and was in charge of doing the census. He had 5 employees. Five people did the census way back in the day. 5. I mean, you think about that now. We got 330 million people in this country now. Could you imagine only 5 people doing the census? I mean, could you imagine? So just to give you a sense of how this went. So, Post Office 1775, Congress established the Departments of State, War, and Treasury in 1789, the first cabinet positions. Department of the Interior, 1849. Department of Defense is after World War II. Housing and Urban Development in 1965, Department of Energy in the 70s, Department of Homeland Security in 2003, right? So we've seen some massive growth of the bureaucracy here. So let's take a look at some data. This is actually from 2002, and Department data from the Department of Defense in 2002 and from the census in 2005. So let's take a look at this. Ah, ha ha, ha ha. This is interesting. Okay. Why is this interesting? Because most people think that it's the federal government that has the largest bureaucracy ever. Like it's big, right? Yeah, but not that big. When you compare it to local, as in places like major cities, like New York City, for example, it pales in comparison. The biggest bureaucracies are actually at the state and local levels, which is interesting. A lot of people assume it's the federal government, but it's not. It's actually state and local that have the largest bureaucracies. So that's interesting because there's this idea that the federal government, oh, is so huge, and it is. It is so huge. We saw it in video one. It is so huge. But when you think about how huge that is, and then look at how big local government is, like, whoa, that's huge. So let's take a look at a graph here. This is, oh God, I'm sorry about the quality of this graph, but we'll do what we can. So if you look, like here we have the executive office of the president, legislative branch, and the judicial branch, right? That's what these guys are right here. It's tiny. The independent agencies, whoo, and then other independent agencies, whoo, and then when you look, defense, that's a big chunk. Veterans Affairs, another big chunk. And then Homeland Security, another big chunk. So just on securing the country, you're looking at like over a third of the budget, or rather of the employees in federal government. You're looking at almost half, actually, which is interesting. So federal employment up through 2016. So let's take a look. So Postal Service, this has stayed pretty steady despite the growth in our population. I mean, massive growth in our population. Postal Service stayed pretty steady, right? Military, woo, big jumps right there. But that makes sense because what was happening then, folks? That would be World War II. And then we have periodic jumps. We got the Korean War over here. We got the Vietnam War there. And we've stayed actually not too bad. We've actually dropped off a little bit after once the Cold War ended right around here, and we start dropping off, right? But other civilian items have stayed pretty steady, right? So we have a lot of federal employees, but we're not seeing spikes like some politicians claim that we're seeing. Like here is a spike, right? But this is staying pretty steady. It's almost actually on a decline, right? So it's interesting. So yeah, let's look at the last administration. It's too early to look at data for Biden. We need more for President Biden. We need more time to crunch the numbers. But this is what we've got in terms of changes in federal employees during President Trump's administration. I'm going to move my camera here so that we can see the percentages here. Okay, so during this is the change. This represents the changes. So in the Treasury, he increased. Defense, he increased. Homeland Security and Veterans Affairs, he increased. In all these other areas, he got a decrease of the bureaucracy during his presidency. But there's still an increase of the bureaucracy here. And let's remember, defense is basically the biggest department anyway. So the fact that we have an increase in the, I mean, how much are you really saving when you're cutting from HUD, transportation, and justice, but you're increasing defense, which is already super huge? So like HUD, it has a lot fewer employees, housing and urban development, than the Defense Department does. So if you get, say, what do we got? Like almost -5, but it's like -3% there, but you're getting like a +3% here. This difference is actually going to net you more in federal employees. Republicans are well known for wanting to chop the bureaucracy up. So here's another graph tracking federal, state, and local, another way of looking at it. I want to expose you guys to different methods of looking at data, right? So a previous graph, the first one we saw, that was a bar graph, right? This is a line graph. So, but it's effectively saying the same thing. Look, at local, up here, super, super high, way higher than state, which is still higher than the federal. Federal is the lowest level, and it stayed pretty steady over the course. So this shows us a little bit different data. This is looking at the tracking federal employees at over time, right? Whereas the bar graph was just giving us sort of a raw number, right? So here's another graph. This goes up to 2017, and if you look, the federal growth of the federal bureaucracy has really stayed steady. But when you look at the, whoa, look at the state and local. Golly be jeepers, you know what I mean? Look at this. This is craziness. So it's really not so much the federal government that's growing, it's really state and local bureaucracies that are growing. Here's another graph, right? So we've got, now if we look at government employment, right? This is looking at government employment. I'm going to bring me right here. There we go. Top 15 state and local job categories. So, ooh, that's me right there. I'm costing taxpayers a lot of money, I guess, right? So local, this is all, virtually all local and state. State is just a little bit here, right? And this is as of 2019, so it's fairly recent. So elementary and secondary education by far is the top job that local and state governments are paying for in terms of public service. Followed not closely by higher education. Then you look at all these other items, right? So by far, it's elementary and secondary ed that are costing the most money. Interesting. And that, folks, is the end. Now, I'm going to take a closer look at all of these graphs in class, so stay tuned for that. But listen, I hope you learned what you needed to. I will see you in the next round of videos when we're in the next unit.